And now to the final event of our conference. It's the last panel at the conference on AI from ambition to action. In order to remain globally competitive, the EU needs two kinds of AI skills. Firstly, professionals with specialized AI skills, such as data modeling, architecture, and semantics, to maintain a strong position in AI research and contribute, of course, to the development and rollout of AI systems. Secondly, a general understanding of the capacities and limitations of AI and the overall workforce, so people can interact proactively with AI. So for this session, we invited representatives of parties directly involved in AI education, training, and research to reflect on the different measures, their relative efficiency, and possible additional avenues that could be also explored. Now, it will look at the different stages of the pipeline, from students' first contacts with AI, and then all the way through to advanced AI research skills, and analyze, of course, how different groups of the population could be better attracted into the field. The panel will be moderated by Dr. Gry Hazelbach, co-founder and research director of the think tank dataethics.eu. She's also a member of EU high-level expert group on AI, a group that developed EU's AI ethics guidelines, contributing directly to the EU's AI strategy. She is now key AI ethics expert and a research lead on the international outreach for human-centric AI initiative that is InTouchAIeu, GRIP, that was launched yesterday together with another initiative, globalpolicy.ai. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you. So I've been provided with this role to give shape to this final plenary session of the high-level conference on AI, where we'll discuss I would say, one of the most essential components on an AI transformation of our societies, the education and skills. Now, during the last 2 days, we've heard a lot about and a lot of mentioning of the human-centric approach to AI. It's an approach we've emphasized in the EU's high-level group on AI in our ethics guidelines, and it's core to the international outreach initiative InTouchAI. So the education and skills dimension of this AI transformation is perhaps one of the most essential components of the human-centric approach to AI. As our societies are going through transformations accelerated by AI, we need this very human skills and expertise to not only shape the technical components, as we heard from Ivana before, but we need it also to guide our education and awareness, a kind of education and awareness that will empower us to take most advantage of AI at the same time as we can mitigate the social and ethical implications, to mitigate, for example, social divides materialize in this increasingly digital reality we're living in. So this is, in fact, the most human-centric thing we can do right now. So the education and skills component, as we've heard, is in this very fast-paced AI development, is fortunately also a core dimension of the EU's AI and digitalization strategies. Something really emphasized, as some of you who've heard the State of the Union speech at the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen this morning emphasized several times. It's a core dimension of the Commission's AI package, but also of the digital education plan, with several educational activities targeted this. So now, to start the panel, we often talk about AI and competition, but I want to introduce this panel by proposing that Europe cannot be outcompeted on the skills and education dimension of AI. In fact, our unique tradition and history in breaking down barriers between and in education and research, combining sciences and humanities and exchanges between different cultural repositories. This is actually, in the AI skills and education area, our most human-centric competitive advantage. But so with me now, we've heard first from excellent keynotes before, and now I have this brilliant and very impressive lineup of speakers that I would like to introduce. Most are actually here with me in person. I have one with me virtually. And these are experts not only in AI, but also in education for AI. So with that, I've actually, at first, I think I wanted to ask each of you a question, or we have asked an introductory question that is very relevant for this panel. So we've asked you all to reflect on, first of all, what is AI skills? What are the necessary AI skills we need to learn? And then given how the AI education system looks in Europe, our school education, university, on-the-job training, what do we consider? What do you consider good practice examples? What elements are we missing in Europe right now? So at first, I want to give the word to Eva Majdal. I have here with me online, actually, member of the European Parliament, also president of the European Movement International, the largest organization of associations and civil societies in Europe. She has a particular policy priority that includes, among many things, but also enhancing access to quality education in the European Parliament. So, Mrs. Majdal, would you like to provide some thoughts on this initial question?
Yes, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to join you virtually. I would have much rather prefer if we would be there all together in person. But first of all, just a couple of thoughts. I think I'm very glad, and I would like to thank the organizers of this conference, because AI is finally getting the attention it deserves in Europe. And as you all know, we need to catch up on that front, but not only in the skills front. Therefore, I'm very happy that the Commission has published its AI package in April, and I'm very much looking forward to our contribution within the European Parliament. I have to say that when we would be talking about skills, education, and AI, a couple of years ago, most of my colleagues would say, well, that's not something we should be talking about. First of all, because AI was, not a matter of discussion at all. And second of all, because skills was something that was perceived to be only a matter of national competences. So today, the Parliament is also working on many more specialized fronts on improving AI for Europe. We are trying to take a look ahead on a strategic level, and this is our task in the Special Committee on AI in the Digital Age. Some of you might have heard of that committee, called ADA, where I am the EPP speaker and coordinator. I think we need a strategic look at AI skills, basically trying to ask ourselves what kind of skills will be needed for the next decade, not only in the next months, not only what we needed yesterday or today, and also what sorts of skills are needed for jobs that do not exist currently, but of which we are quite sure they will exist in few years' time. That could be AI in control, in safety, in auditing, or oversight, or human AI interaction. So these are just few of the topics which I would like us to discuss, and most importantly, to hear from the experts. And that would be all for me for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Claudio Faiu, you are a full professor and vice president for entrepreneurship at the Technical University of Madrid, leading programs on education, launch, and acceleration of tech-based startups and spin-offs. You've also worked in assignments on 5 continents for main international institutions, and have a 20-year plus, I will add, background as founder and mentor of startups, and is experienced also in managing the implementation of innovative projects. So your kind of initial thoughts on this question on AI skills, but also what do we need in Europe?
So first, thanks for the invite, obviously, and good afternoon, everybody. And I'm also here, I think, maybe more important in my capacity, leading a project for the European Union. In fact, it's founded by the Connecting Europe facility on a master on AI for public services. So this is the experience a little bit I want to share with you. And in that capacity, I think there are two important concepts. And one of them is a little bit rephrasing what Professor Bartoletti was saying. I think we need functional specialists. I think we need people who, of course, understand a particular domain, a particular sector, a particular industry, but at the same time, they are able to manage technology, in particular AI technology. They're able to design maybe new services, new solutions, and also they are able maybe eventually to implement them. And this combination is what makes a little bit Europe unique, because then we can put inside our European values and we can prove that we are also have a little bit of a competitive advantage because we are different from the rest, because we are able to implement things with technology, sometimes part of the problem, but hopefully part of the solution, but not the full solution. And this is one thing, functional specialist. And I think the other important component is, this is obvious, project-based education. But beyond project-based education, I think is choosing exactly which are the cases, which are the projects. I think some of them should be international because we want some spillovers from Europe into other areas with our vision. Some of them should be national, regional, local, probably. And also, I think we are able to produce a wider, broader, maybe even deeper type of projects. In some other jurisdictions, this will be impossible. While we can explore and we can tackle, especially putting society, people, individuals in the core, while others, I think they struggle with this. So these two ideas, I think, is at least my initial thoughts, functional specialist and project-based education, choosing which are the right projects.
Thank you. Now, Ivana Bartoletti, we heard from you before, but those of you who've just joined us right now, I just want to introduce you as the international recognized thought leader in the field of responsible technology. In particular, I know you from the privacy field and also a visiting policy fellow at the University of Oxford and founder of the very influential international network, Women Leading in AI. So what are your initial thoughts on this question about AI skills and also what we need?
Thank you so much, and it's great to be here on this panel. And I think it's I'm very much in agreement with what I've just heard. I mean, this, to some extent, over the last decades, we've entered into this sort of dichotomy between being a generalist and being professionalized. So we've seen this sort of rise in the professionalized work, and of course that is complex for two reasons. First is because I think the professionalized is the ones that is more at risk with AI, because that's what AI is trained to do, very specific tasks. But also for now, but also because the complexity of things that AI brings is huge, and it's not just yet another technological tool. I mean, it's rather transformative, and this is why we need to see it in a specific way. So when I say it's transformative because has the power, it has the geopolitical power, as we know. It's transformative because it has the power to reshape the way that we live and work. The relationship with machines is going to be very transformational moving forward and change a lot of our habits. So because it's so transformational, then I think it really requires a lot of tasks. And it does require a lot of skills around it. And some of them will be very humanistic skills, some of them will be much less. So, but again, the most important thing that I really, to me, has been my battle in my own profession, in the privacy world, is the idea that we really need to stop having this sort of dichotomy between those who are, for example, just lawyers and those who are work in technologies. The inability that we still have to find the sort of this communication between different backgrounds is something that we really have to move beyond. And to me, this is sort of the most important thing in this debate.
Now, moving on to Professor Andrei Brodnik at the University of Ljubljana and also the University of Primorska. You're a member of the Strategic Council for Digitalization in Slovenia and Slovenian Digital Coalition. You're a computer scientist with interest in, as I've read my way to, succinct data structures, algorithms, ubiquitous systems, and computer science education. You've also written over 150 scientific papers and won several awards, but one thing I noticed was a national award for exceptional achievements in higher education, which is also relevant for this panel right now. Your initial thoughts on, again, AI skills and what we need?
Yeah, thank you, Gry. Thank you for a very kind introduction. I would like to emphasize something what is perhaps not really put in the center. And in the center should be put the European citizen and the skills of the European citizen. Now, the European citizens are of different ages. They are from age 0 up to 70, 80, 90. And if we are talking about AI coming into reality, we have to address skills and knowledge for all the generations here to be really introduced. But I think we have a very nice example in history. If we are looking back in, let's say, 1700 something plus, when James Watt invented the steam engine. The steam engine was there something really revolutionary, and nobody really thought about this technology beforehand, but then it was kind of step by step introduced as technology in different areas. It's the same thing as Claudio mentioned, the domain knowledge of technology, domain knowledge where the technology can be used. However, this was not sufficient, because from that perspective, everybody would be just engineer running the steam engines on the railway or boat, and that was it. On the other hand, we need in our education also the people who will be developing the steam engines, or in our case, the technology of AI. And this is the really big issue in Europe, because I think we are lacking of this direction of education. Nonetheless, let me just mention 2 or 3 current initiatives which are going in this direction. The first one is DIGCOMP 2.2. Everybody is, I guess, aware of DIGCOMP 2.1. And DIGCOMP 2.2 is just now finishing at the JRC. And one of the parts which was especially introduced there was cross all competencies, also introduction of the skills of AI, which should be kind of in a portfolio of every European citizen. This is actually answer on the question what perhaps should be there, and there is some work in this. On the other hand, the second document which I want to mention is Digital Education Action Plan, which is also issued by the European Union, and in 1 or 2 actions which are specifically mentioned is AI mentioned there, and it is mentioned very strongly in connection with deeper understanding of digital technology, or computing or informatics for that matter. And nonetheless, the last thing is just today, it's finishing the first round of a discussion on the new curriculum framework for the informatics, which was introduced by Informatics for All and IFIP, which is kind of a collaboration of IFIP, ACM Europe, and some other institutions. And there is a special area mentioned there about the artificial intelligence, and is strongly emphasized that this is cross-sectional area through other digital or informatics areas. So yes, I think for the prosperous, as Jure was talking in the previous one of the talks, and as you were talking, right, we need to have both. We need to have people who can use and people who can develop. Now, the educational system, it is the issue of the member states, but still I think we should be very much going in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Blas Zupan, Professor of Computer Science, University of Ljubljana. You teach artificial intelligence and machine learning, both in Ljubljana and Houston, actually. running a 15-member bioinformatics laboratory at the University of Ljubljana. You also developed Orange, an open source toolbox for machine learning that I remember was being actually mentioned in the initial video starting this conference. Published your work in also more than 100 articles and receiving a lot of citations. Now, speaking of good education, also, you are a 6-time recipient of the UL Friis Best Teacher Award, which I think is a very interesting fact about you. Your initial thoughts also on this?
Yeah. So, thank you. So what Andre said actually. So we need people that know how to develop AI systems, and I think we are okay with that. And it's not that difficult to develop AI systems. I mean, take any student in computer science, and they know how to assemble deep learning and so on. So I would say that that problem is almost solved. But then, in general, right? Do people know about AI? So there was this great video of students commenting this, right? And I would say they don't have, in general, they don't have a clue, right? So we are entering, AI is like the technology of this century together with biotechnology, right? We know a lot about biotechnology because there's a lot of biology, chemistry, and these kind of sciences, right? People know how, I don't know, steam engine works. People know how diesel engine works. People know how, I don't know, nuclear reactor works, right? But we have no clue. I mean, just go on the streets of Ljubljana, stop anybody, right? Ask them what is in AI, how Google does their stuff, right? They would not know anything. And this is, so there's absolutely no education, I mean, probably with some exceptions in primary schools. There's nothing in secondary schools in Slovenia. There's something in engineering schools. Of course, there's a lot of AI in computer science, but in general, right, people like managers, decision makers, politicians, they're clueless about this technology. I think this can be changed, and I think Europe has a unique opportunity to change this immediately. Immediately meaning that we have means of how to infuse knowledge about the AI, machine learning, and data science, starting with the primary schools. And I would not go in changing any curriculum. I would not say that there should be, I don't know, a course on AI. I would be actually against teaching on AI in schools. But I would change the principal subjects like biology, history, languages, such that kids start to use AI tools within those subjects, right? And we can do that immediately. And I don't mean teaching kids to program, right? Because for some of them it's difficult. I mean, using the tools that are simple enough where people can actually find about the concepts in AI, such as supervised machine learning, clustering, data visualizations. I mean, this is so easy to do, and you can do that. I mean, I claiming because we tried, right? You can do that in 1 hour or 2 hours. Now, just make, I'm going to make a simple example and then I'll finish. For instance, we can go to biology class at the end of the primary school and we can tell the kids that for COVID virus, right, there's this spike protein and there we can gather, I mean, here's a list of spike proteins of different viruses, and then they will notice there's some difference in the code, right? And then we teach them about the distance, and then we teach them about hierarchical clustering. We don't need to name it like that, right? And then, I don't know, within an hour they can discover that this virus actually came from a specific animal. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to ask now, I've been very inspired by all of your introductory statements, but I would like to target some questions directly at each of you. So Eva Majdal, you're still with us, I can see. I'm wondering, so several of us have mentioned that the European Commission is working on a digital strategy that includes investment, for example, in digital skills and education in different ways. So according to you, what is needed to ensure that Europe's workforce will be equipped with the necessary digital skills, and what educational changes do you think are necessary to train, for example, young people in digital skills?
Yeah, thank you very much for coming back to me. I think the most important aspect in AI skills is to kind of turn the immense interest that AI instills into actual knowledge about what is it, how it can be integrated in all our daily activities, including our work and our social interactions in life. You mentioned we need a strategy that benefits everyone. And so I want to focus on the digital divides that they're central, I think, in thinking about AI skills. So first of all, inside organizations like cybersecurity, a decade ago, many CEOs think AI is something for their IT department, but it's not at all. It's a very key leading management issue. It's also a marketing issue. It's a personnel issue and many other things. So we need to educate that. And as the previous speaker was saying, everyone needs to be educated about what machine learning is and what is AI. Second, when we talk about the labor market, you don't need to understand much about AI to get many ideas what it can be used for and how you and your work and your data interfere with AI. But there are many who don't even have a basic understanding of electronics, and without such a basis, it's very difficult to get AI. So we need to achieve some sort of a baseline from where we can start to think about those specialized skills. And lastly, and third, inside and between countries, how we, approach the subject. Europe is a very diverse country and is very diverse to its understanding of AI as well. That is because it depends on what sort of income your country has. It's also depending on the industry focus and the integration that the AI has been implemented and integrated in industry, or whether AI is just used for service economy and big data. I think we also need to answer our questions about how important is AI in different sectors, and that also depends on the economy and the country's specificalities. And so I very much believe that it's so key to integrate AI in the way we educate the next generation, as the previous speaker was very, very concrete in how we can have this innovative education. That's at least how I call it, and maybe it's not correct in terms of more educational aspect, but that's one way to make it fit for and prepared for today, but also for tomorrow, hopefully. But it's clear that we need this sort of continuous expansion of knowledge also for the people that are now in position to take decisions, or for people that are in the labor market, because the labor market is changing much faster compared to before. And so that's why I think we need to address simultaneously these various aspects.
Now, Claudio Fayu, independent of what you're studying today, all fields that we're talking about, several people have mentioned that today, are becoming increasingly computational. We're using more and more AI techniques. So when we're talking about AI education, we don't only talk about, as others have also mentioned, about computer science and building a system in AI. So what do you think young people and prospective students also, what do they need to know and learn when it comes to AI? How do we best teach AI?
So good news, huh? Because I think we are arriving at kind of a consensus. I remember my days at the Commission where you need that. So in my list I note it should be practical, so it should be in context, and I'm adding two other, maybe a little bit different. I also think it should be social. Why? Because this is part of our European values. So this should be a focus. And there's also interesting, there's some preliminary research that says that a little bit of the gender divide that still is in technology disappears to a certain extent when you put social in the center. This is interesting. So one more thing. And the other factor, I will say that this is also extremely important, that if we want to scale up quickly, and this is also, again, important because there's a competition going on, we need to share resources. We need to have repositories, we need to have zero courses, and even more important than that, we need to curate that content. So we have a new role for the trainers. We need to train the trainers. So they become mentors and they become curators of content, and they need to take you and something new that is personalized goals. What do you want to do learning or using technology like AI, and also some personalized path. No? And even this can be supported to a certain extent, even by technology, by AI itself, to help you down this path. So for me, I will add these ideas of social and important sharing resources. In fact, I understand that the Connecting Europe facility that is helping us to develop, for example, this master and some other courses, is really, this is the focus, no? This digital skills and jobs platform they want to build goes in this direction. Sharing resources to scale up as quickly as possible, improve that we Europeans, we have something important able to do.
So picking up on this idea of, or this thing we see with gender divides that are somehow being, we already saw it with digital divides, and then now we see them in the AI field, repeating some of the maybe the mistakes we've made in the past. Some of these traditional digital gender divides, how do we increase the number of female AI specialists, Ivana Bartoletti, before these differences materialize also in the AI field?
Thank you. So first of all, if I may, you said something really important in relation to people not understanding AI, and I think this is related to what I'm going to say, so I just wanted to pick up on what you said. I think this is an essential issue here, because if you go around and you say to people, what do you think about AI? People will say, Terminator, robots, yeah? And there is a problem here, because, and the problem here is also the way that all this is portrayed. Every time they talk of AI, there is always a robot. This robot is most of the time female, especially if it's an assistant. And then you wonder why there are few women in AI. Humanized, and we haven't discussed as a society if we are happy with humanized robots, with human feature. And so the reason why I'm saying this is because we need to get people to understand, and also the media need to play a better part in this, that AI is not just a robot, and especially it's not a robot with a human face, and it's not just an assistant that, with a female face. And this is really, really important, because we have to be careful that we're not sleepwalking into all this. We're not sleepwalking into exacerbating and replicating the stereotypes that we've got in society right now. And there have been battles that many people have won over the last few years, and they have to win them once again. So, for example, sort of virtual assistants in the homes, they're all female names. Alexa, Siri, Cortana. And the way that we're responding to orders was obeying. Female assistants, virtual female voices assistants, they are not there to contest. They're just there to obey to what you say. And the fact that they were female, that was a problem. Because we're raising a generation of younger children shouting a female-named object what they want. The reason why I'm saying all this is because this is by no means a complex, an easy matter, what we're talking about. What we are saying is, the reason why we need a more diverse workforce in this area is because of how we are designing what we're going to do, which input we're going to put in the features that we're going to choose. For example, bias in systems is not just some people say, well, it's just the data. No, it's not just the data. There are many reasons why bias happens. But even before that, I would say, and I know I can be quite, some people disagree with me on this, but I understand very much the push to get more women into the design of AI. But to me, there is a priority which is higher than that, which is to have more diversity in the decision-making rooms, where the decisions surround what we are going to produce, what we are going to use it for, are going to be made. Because otherwise, there is a big problem with the design, there's a problem with the controls and all of that. But the main problem at the moment is what are we going to produce, for what reasons, what are the problems that we're going to solve, what are the challenges that we're facing. And this is where I would like to see much more diversity, which is exactly in where those decision-makers are, top of businesses and the tables in sort of politics as well. And this is where I think is really important to create that diversity right now.
So, Andrew Brodnik, now, social divides are obviously reproduced and they're accelerated, and there's gender divides, but there's also other kinds of divides. Most older people in the workforce, they're not skilled in these more sophisticated AI systems that we are getting incorporated in everything we do. And even when they're working with digital tools, it can be a problem. So how do we ensure that this whole generation is not left behind? How do we bring these people into the game, so to speak?
Thank you, Gry. I would go half a sentence back when you mentioned the word divide. I think that Europe cannot afford to have yet another or yet 3 more divides. Turns out that, for example, the educational divide between people or students or teachers or kids who are taking the digital education and those who are not taking is even growing, and this is a thing which we cannot afford. It's the same thing with the AI, and moreover, it is also the same thing with the gendered AI. For example, just to support your claim, for example, we have this Beavers competition, Bebras competition, and it turns out that up to grade 6, 7, the number of girls and boys is about the same who are competing, but then later something changes. I think we have to work on this. And now going to the age divide, this is a really crucial thing. Now, I guess that most of the people who are listening to this are not necessary to be convinced that AI is something what needs to be considered in their daily life. But we have to think about also the small and medium companies which have a workforce which was educated, let's say, 20 years ago. How do we bring them to this thing, right? To this new technology? And I think this is a huge responsibility for us and also for the society. In Slovenia, the Strategic Council for the Digitalization is also considering how to improve this level of the education for older people, because this is the only way how to bring the new technology to the society. However, I think it was you who mentioned the word trust. I mean, somebody will use the technology if he or she will trust it. Now, this is the real problem, and I think this is the problem which also Blaž tried to mention, because the students who were walking around Ljubljana, right, do they trust the technology? Yes, they can trust as much as they can understand the technology, right? So I think we have a huge work to work for the in-service people, let's say, put it this way. I think this is much bigger work to accomplish than the ones who are in pre-service. For the kids, it's kind of easy. We just have to, they will go with the flow, but those who are already in a service, how do we bring them? And I think Europe really needs to give some kind of a guidelines what kind of skills and knowledge should be given to every person in Europe. There was mentioning something about workforce how was this Eva workforce movement, right? And for this purpose, I think that the workforce needs to have more of this technological knowledge, that it can be even more movable. So yes, education is the thing which is not only for the K-12 or university, as Blush mentioned, but it is for the whole duration of the lifetime. And this will also improve the quality of our industry and make European society more prosperous, with a very strong emphasis on humanities and understanding the technology, what does it take from us and what does it bring to us.
Lifelong learning skills, basically, yes. So, Blas Zuban, so we heard earlier from a previous keynote speaker about AI talent, and of course the AI development, if we want it in Europe, if we want it anywhere, it's very much dependent on top talents. So Europe do have AI specialists, but as many recent surveys are showing, European companies actually have a lot fewer AI specialists than, for example, respective US companies. So how do we keep AI top talent and attract new ones in Europe? You're in between, for example, Europe and the US.
Yeah, the difference is not what. So I would disagree with Jure Leskovec here. I mean, who's AI top talent, right? So Jure was talking about researchers and coders, right, and also like geeks, right, that put together the neural nets, right? I would say no. I mean, so we definitely need them, right? But we have them. This is not that difficult, right? The AI top talent is a person who actually enters a company and changes it to a data-driven organization. And this is not usually the computer scientist. I mean, can be, right? But it's usually a very excellent manager, right? So for me, right, AI top talent, right? So how do we keep those people? The question is, how do we educate them in the first place, right? How do we tell them that this technology exists? Because in my experience, if you walk not only small and medium companies, but if you walk like into a big company, right? The management, I'm sorry to say, right, but usually they are clueless about potentials of this new technology, right? And I think Europe has a unique opportunity. So we can no longer lead in AI. So we've been surpassed in development of AI by China and US, but we can lead the world in AI education. Really. I mean, if we can change something, we can change something in several next years, we can lead the world there, right? And actually train this AI top talent, right? But start from the primary school already and then go up, right? So with that, I have to say there are some initiatives. Also, there's a coming initiative in Slovenia that will likely be supported by Google, right? Of how to teach at the very elementary level the concepts of AI. And I think this is critically important, right? And when we speak about AI top talents, right, I would have this change, right? Do not think about computer scientists anymore, because we are hugely lacking skilled managers that can actually see where this technology can be applied, and they can change the existing and new companies such that they take advantage of this technology.
So I wonder if we still have Eva Maydell with us, because I would love to ask her a question. If not,
I'm here.
You're there, okay. Sorry, I just couldn't see you. It's always complex with these hybrid events. Eva Maydell, education, it's a national competence, yet everybody recognizes it as a everyone is recognizing the transnational dimension of AI as basically all areas in AI. So what can the EU do to foster AI skills while respecting the national prerogatives at the same time?
Well, if I have to be a little bit provocative, and with this I might never be invited by any presidency, is I would say, well, don't respect the national prerogatives, right? Anyhow, I'm kidding. But in a way, it's probably, I'm trying to be, a little bit edgy and a little bit bold. Let me first answer your question, and I'll go back to that point once again. First of all, I think it was just earlier today when President von der Leyen said we need a European Council dedicated on education. I'm very happy she said that. Either she has someone in her team or herself that has similar ideas to the ones I've been proposing for a long, long time. I've been calling for an EU summit on education for years now. And this is not because we just want one summit where we'll talk that through, but we want to show the importance of education, and we want to make sure that European leaders could understand why education has to be reinvented at a European level. Second, as I said, there's also a local element to AI skills that national or regional authorities can better take care of. Educational systems are very different. So any push on AI skills needs to be supported, or there has to be this total commitment from member states. And I think, where EU can help is helping member states to think through the most difficult aspects of this decades-long transition. What will be the demand for AI skills? How should we redesign our education system, our governments? How can we bring AI skills into companies, into public institutions, into academia, and so on and so forth? When I would sit in the committee that's responsible for industry and innovation, years ago, nobody would open, the topic on skills. In the beginning of this mandate, we had Commissioner Vestager with us, EVP Vestager, and all of a sudden, every second question was about skills. I was just like, what happened here? All of a sudden, there's more awareness within policymakers that we need skilled professionals on one hand. But on the other hand, and I call that, and that's again in relation to what Blaž was saying, on the other hand, we need also those digital leaders. And those digital leaders are the people that don't necessarily have to be able to code or are not an ICT manager, but people that understand technologies, people that are ready to trust technologies and, involve them into their processes in order for their, companies to grow, in order for societies to be better prepared, better resilient, or just simply better organized. And so I think this is, part of the thing that we are missing currently. But it's very, very tricky. I see it within the European Parliament. I see it in the various meetings with stakeholders that I have. And today in her speech, President von der Leyen said, well, now it's the make or break moment for digital. Well, I'm very happy that this was in the speech, but honestly, without wanting to be overly critical, this was, 10 years ago, probably. And some of the experts on the panel could estimate it better. I'm glad we are realizing it today, but it's high time we act. And education is such a key component on making our societies and our companies better prepared, but also importantly, successful in the field of technology.
Thank you. Some very interesting points and not at all provocative, I think, but that's how we take it. So Claudio Faijo, again, I want to get back to you also. So there are, going back to also moving on to the point and some of your background in the startup environment and these things. So there are universities that offer startup acceleration programs, startup clusters and other sorts of technology transfer. So while we see the most of this, we see it outside Europe. We are also starting to see some success stories here inside Europe. So what do we need to develop this kind of thriving technology transfer programs at a university, for example? How can European universities learn from these experiences?
The situation in Europe is improving rapidly, I would say, no? But for me, my day-to-day work, I think there is a three-step, no? Maybe process or measure that we need to be taken. The first one is connected with what I was saying, that is the base. Huh? I think 100% of university students need to be tapped in entrepreneurship. Not because they are going to become entrepreneurs, because psychologically it's maybe 10, 20%. This is what figures say, because you're not prepared, you're not ready for that. But because it's going to give you more employability, you are going to be personally more resilient in a world surrounded by risk, lack of information, uncertainty. And also because, and this is exactly what you were mentioning, this is teaching you how to become a change maker. So especially for technical universities, like the one I'm now currently, this is super important because it's not about technology, it's about how to use technology to change positively. And this is important. So this is the first step, the base. Second one will be some positive incentives. So now every university has startup programs of different kinds, maybe even spin-off venture builder programs and looking for technologies mature enough within the university, trying to spin them off. But the framework, the positive framework for incentives, so the universities, for instance, other institutions can get a return on that investment is missing. Governance, responsibilities, this is missing, and I think this is an important factor. And the third one is a little bit of co-creation. So I'm rather skeptical when I see challenges launched by companies or institutions. I think it's rather the opposite. So it's the institutions, public or can be private companies, they need to go back to university and they need to sit together and co-create opportunities. You know, using this McKinsey's framework with innovation. Universities as the origin of innovations, let's suppose we are also in Europe, no? It's not for Horizon 1, it's not just to add an upcoming an existing product with a new feature or something like something that is needed immediately. We are much better for Horizon 2, for the next generation. And this is actually what we are talking here about, is how to use AI for this change. And then come and sit with us and let's co-create these new opportunities and looking into not tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow with universities.
So Ivana Bartoletto again. So far we've mostly talked about education for AI for the future. How do we prepare for this? But if we think about AI as something that could also maybe improve education in ways, so what do you think are the potentials of AI in teaching and learning? If you want to look at it from that side, for example, helping some groups which are less likely to work with AI from an AI solution in general?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I'm actually quite intrigued by the promises of AI in this sector. Again, I mean, I do think that it does require a lot of change in the way that we imagine schools, in the way that we retrain and teachers in doing all that. But in any case, I've seen that there is a proliferation of work around AI in education, particularly the majority of things that I'm seeing are in relation to the personalization of education. In the idea that using AI can help help the child grow according to their own needs, their own ability to understand, the speed at which they're able to comprehend some particular concept. You know, so there is very much this idea of personalization, which is really interesting. I've also seen a lot of, and probably this is something that's been, I've found more fascinating, a lot of support with children with learning disabilities. So autism, and this has been really, really important. And I think, I'm quite positive around promises in this area. At the same time, though, I I think we have to apply a little bit of caution as well. For one reason, because education, perhaps like housing and health, are those areas where we feel that there is an opportunity for everyone. Those are the areas that they are important because through education you break the pattern. You break the pattern of your upbringing, for example. You create your road in life, and to an extent, this is very much the opposite of what a lot of the AI is about, which is around prediction. So one of the things that really concerns me around the use of AI in education is how are we going to reconcile the role of education as a lever for opportunities and the reality of predictive AI systems, which are often there to predict on the basis of backgrounds, previous data, and the situation as it is now not where it should be. So I think, especially in the area of AI in education, we need the strong commitment to want to bring equality in education, and that commitment needs to be strongly embraced, otherwise it's not going to happen automatically, especially with AI. I mean, it hasn't happened without AI in systems where it's often difficult to step up or choose different patterns from the one when you've grown up into. And I think the risk is that we make it even more difficult if we were to use AI, for example, in grading, or AI in assigning places for education, or AI in understanding particular attitudes of students, where, for example, these decisions may be based on historic information. So in a nutshell, there are some, as ever in this area, there are some really fascinating and potential outcomes and incredible opportunities that we must take. But in education, more than in other sectors, I think the issue of understanding the pitfalls is really important, so that we make it mandatory for companies, schools, and education systems that use the products, but even for the products to be released to make sure that there are some checks and controls around the most dangerous pitfalls of these systems.
So, Andrew Brodnik, now we're talking about AI used as a potential in education, but AI developments, they tend to concentrate in established digital hubs very often. So how can we ensure that that this is spread out, that other parts of Europe, for example, not only the digital hub will take part?
I guess you're asking, Gri, that the knowledge becomes open, or science becomes an open. Yes, yeah. So I guess this is the answer to your question, right? Now, I think that Jure already mentioned in his speech that there should be some kind of a pan-European institute for the excellence in AI, and the knowledge will be widespread throughout Europe. I think that Europe as such would have to have, should make the science more European in that sense, that one of the key of the values which Europeans do value is your neighbor, the person who is sitting next to you. And as soon as we accept all of us this, then also the path to this open science and knowledge would be present. However, if we go back to the question about the AI in education, it's like a question of déjà vu. ICT in education or education ICT, right? Now, we have to be very careful here, even what Claudio said. I mean, education is yet another area of application of AI, which is very specific. And it is very specific depending on the age of educatees, right? Yeah. So it's completely different if you are talking about the 6-year, 8 years old, or if you're talking about 40 years or 45 years old. I guess the AI in education is much more and much easier applicable in the later stages, because it doesn't require that much social interaction as it is necessary in the younger ages. So I would be very cautious, but in any case, yes, the open science would be the thing which would bring the benefits to all European citizens, I guess. But, as I said, to do this, we have to understand what AI is, what does it offer, what are its caveats, what are its dangers, and for this we need education about EA.
And so jumping on that, there's always this side, the opportunities, and then there's the ethical and implications and also risks. Blas, Supan, what would you consider here at the last moment as the key kind of risk and ethical implications of using AI for education, considering how important education is in people's lives?
I think the biggest risk of introducing AI in education is thinking that the AI can replace the teacher. I think that's the biggest one. Whoever thinks that, I shouldn't use the word, but well, I won't. But whoever thinks that is dead wrong. As long as I remember, right, all the schooling that I've done, right, I don't remember as much as what I learned as who taught me actually. And I can relate back to mentors that I had in my life, right? And then they changed me. Perhaps, the teacher of my chemistry changed. He was a really bad teacher of chemistry, but he taught me all the other things, right? And we should not forget about that, right? So AI is just a tool, right? And we should actually, the way forward, right, is actually to ask the best teachers that we have in Europe how they would like to be assisted with the AI. The technology should not be done by computer geeks and then put into schools. That's a mistake that we should not do, right? By the way, we've done something like this with PowerPoints. PowerPoints destroyed so many good classes and turning them into something absolutely boring, right? So if I would be here a legislator, I would actually prohibit PowerPoints, at least in primary and secondary education, but maybe I'm going too far and I should quit here, so thank you.
Well, it's a very nice final going back to an old technology that taught us something for today about AI. Exactly, human in command control.
Teacher center.
Teacher or human-centric in general. And that going back to the original thought about education and skills has been something of one of the key components of a human-centric approach to AI. So I want to finish on that note. Just to wrap up quickly, we talked about AI skills. We agreed that it's not only technical skills, but it goes across also creating awareness and education to mitigate risks and make use of opportunities, to mitigate social divides, gender between generations. Conditions for keeping talent in Europe. We do need some conditions, but we mostly need to nurture the ones we have already. We are experts in breaking borders between different fields and silos. So that's something we can build on. And then last but not least, and of course that's something very close to my heart from the working in the high-level group on the human-centric approach. We need human-centric, trustworthy AI skills. We need to take some values that we have, build them into the systems, and even empower ourselves to actually take charge of this development. And in that sense, I'm very positive about the future. So thank you very much. Excellent conversation. And thank you for the ones that were listening or the ones that are here in the room.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you and Gry for moderating the debate. Very interesting. Thank you very much.